Thanks for coming, guys. My name's Katie Sasso. I'm a data scientist at a place called the Columbus Collaboratory in Ohio, in the States. And I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about something myself and my team members created, which is a coupling of Shiny and something called Electron, which I'll tell you guys a little bit about. And we are using this as a means of quickly getting Shiny apps into users' hands as desktop applications or executables. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Collaboratory because it's kind of our structure is what inspired us to go a different route than some of the currently available options for deploying Shiny apps. So we're a startup-ish in the Columbus, Ohio area, and we were founded by these 7 major companies in the area. So those are our equity holders. So if you've ever heard of Victoria's Secrets, their parent company is L Brands. Those are one of our members. So think of our clients as these huge companies that have like 50,000 plus people, all sorts of lockdowns in terms of what they can and cannot access as employees in these organizations. And the IT infrastructure within these companies is massive, and things can take a while to get done within these big companies. So that is kind of how we decided that in order to get the results of our deliverables into users' hands quicker, we might want to turn to a different deployment strategy. So we work in these kind of 8 to 10 week sprints, and the Collaboratory is a company that focuses on accelerating our clients in data analytics and cybersecurity. So our goal is to create quick deliverables, and we start off with kind of what we call prototypes to prove out the value for these clients for whatever their research question might be. So the materials for today, so actually using Electron as a means to deploying Shiny app, you're going to want to go to the Columbus Collaboratory GitHub repo. So it's right here, and this will be later on in the presentation. And then I'll also have this link appearing throughout the presentation. This is to my personal GitHub repo, and this is where you can find the presentation materials, including some embedded videos that I think are really helpful for actually using Electron yourself to deploy Shiny apps. So everything you'll see here today is totally open source, so you could leave here and you could use this to deploy your next Shiny app. Okay, so I'm assuming most people in this room are pretty familiar with Shiny. If you're not, you're in a good place to learn about it. So with that aside, you might not know what Electron is. And I also didn't really know myself until my coworker, who's a big software guy, kind of had this idea to bring these two things together. So Electron is a coupling of Chromium, which is a web browser, and Node.js that are brought together in order to enable users to build what are called thick client applications. So basically, it's kind of a coupling of these web technologies that allow people to build these applications using a variety of web-based technologies, including HTML, JavaScript, and now Shiny. So a lot of apps you've probably heard of are actually built on Electron. So Slack, which is a messenger app, Skype. So these are all examples of thick client applications that were built using Electron. So I'll go over what Chromium and Node.js are, but basically together they launch the instance of a browser window within this Electron environment. So we decided to basically take Electron and then take R and package R into directory, then put that directory within the Electron repo and make it available to Electron. So within this Electron environment, we brought R in, and then we reference R based on its relative path within this Electron directory. So basically, we brought R in, and that allows us to do anything we do in R in this Electron environment, and then package it up into a thick application format, just like these other applications, which you're probably more familiar with. So I'm just going to go over a little bit of how this works. So I mentioned kind of the key here is us bringing R into the Electron Git repository or directory, and then referencing R based on its relative path. So first, kind of what is Electron? So this is a great resource if you want to just explore Electron a little bit. So you could use Electron to build a variety of applications, not just to deploy your Shiny app. So this is the website for Electron. It's electronjs.org. And if you scroll down, you can see all the applications that are built on Electron, so a ton, actually. So we're using it for this very specific case, which is relevant to R. So that's a good resource. And then this is just kind of the actual JavaScript code that we made a modification to. So there's a few things we modified within the Electron environment to get R working in there, but this is kind of the big one. This is the meat of what we're doing here. So this is already done for you. You don't have to concern yourself with this, but it's kind of just the technical background. So this is what I was talking about here. We've placed what we call R Portable within the Electron repository. And then we're just referencing here based on its relative path within the Electron environment. So this allows Electron to call R and to point to R. So a little bit more on what Electron is, what Node.js and Chromium are, and how they work in Electron. And some background on what thick client applications are. So thick client applications basically provide functionality of a full web app independent of a remote internet server. So in a thick client application, you run both the user interface and the logic on your computer locally versus a web page where you're bringing down that user interface, making changes, and then communicating back with the server. So that's kind of what a thick client application is in a nutshell. And then Node.js here within this Electron environment, this is kind of our main process. So this is what launches the actual Shiny app. And you can think of this as tantamount to kind of the server-side process in a standard web application. So we use Node.js to launch Shiny apps as kind of our main process here. So Node.js actually launches the Shiny app, and then it redirects the renderer, which in this case is Chromium, the web browser, to the URL where the Shiny app is running. So in this case, it's just your home IP address and your local port. So Chromium then is just the key to the user interface for our Shiny app. So it's our web browser. So it provides just a window to the Shiny app, just like a web browser would in any other context. So when we call the Shiny app function, it's kind of just like you would in RStudio, but it's all happening in this Electron environment. And Node.js is saying, hey, Chromium, look at the URL where the Shiny app is running. And the Shiny app is running, again, by that Node.js process. So you might be wondering, why do we need yet another means of deploying a Shiny app? There's already tons of great options here. So I just want to go through these other deployment options just to give you a sense of how we went through them in our process and said, yeah, that's not really going to work for us. Let's kind of develop something else open source. So you can, of course, deploy your Shiny app to shinyapps.io. Free to use, really easy. You don't need any crazy IT team to do this. But this was kind of a non-starter for us with a lot of our clients in these major companies because they can be very averse, whether you agree with their logic or not, they can be very averse to sending their data and their IP to the cloud. So despite the fact that you can pay to put user authentication on your application, even if it's deployed with shinyapps.io, this was not really an option for us. So there's, of course, these other great on-premise solutions for deploying your Shiny app. So Shiny Server, RStudio Connect, Shiny Server Pro. So these come with a whole suite of user authentication controls that you can put on your Shiny app to restrict who sees it. You can deploy them on-premise. You don't need to poke a hole in your firewall. So you might be wondering, what's wrong with these? Well, there's nothing wrong with them, but they all require an IT team to set up this initial environment and to manage it. So when we're in this consulting framework where we're working with departments within these huge companies, sometimes these departments might be HR or marketing, so they have to put in IT requests just like anybody else in this 50,000 person plus company. And believe it or not, IT kind of initiatives in these companies can take a really long time, like months to years. If they're even approved at all. So there has to be a pretty strong business value for some change like this to happen within these organizations. So this is kind of not really a great option for us either, because if we build something really quickly, we build a model and we want to get it into the user's hands, and the user is not somebody who can consume an R package we might build for them, this isn't really going to work because it'd be a few months before the user could even interact with what we built, if they could end up even interacting with it at all. There's also other creative options. I know last year at USAR there were some talks about using Docker containers to deploy Shiny apps. Great options. Even the data scientists on our team could probably spin up Docker instances. But this again would require that initial host environment of Docker to be set up, which again requires IT to be involved. So that's how we decided to look outside of these standard options to something that would allow us to really quickly, ourselves as the data science team, package up these Shiny apps and send them out to users and just get them in the user's hands as quickly as possible so the user could start interacting with what we actually delivered to them without waiting months on IT or doing something that wouldn't even be an option within their company. So that's where we landed on Electron. So I think the really cool thing about this is Electron is also a big open source project, and you can leave here and you can do this yourself. So I actually made a video of the whole cloning of the Electron repo and using it to deploy a Shiny app so you guys can follow along here. So I'm going to talk through this. So basically the first step is to just go to the Columbus Collaboratory GitHub repo. So if you can't see that, it was the first thing in the slides here. You can find the slides down at my GitHub right here. So you're going to go to the GitHub repo, our Git repo, and then you're going to go to the Electron repo specifically. And then you want to just start by cloning it. So kind of just a note here, if you don't have Node.js installed, this is kind of the first step. And if you don't have Git, then you'll have to install that as well. So assuming you have those two dependencies, first thing we're going to do, just open up Terminal, pick a directory, and clone the Columbus Collaboratory Electron repo into it. So we've done that. Next thing we need to do is a global install of Electron Packager. So you only need to do this one time. So once you've built one Shiny app and deployed it with Electron on your machine, you don't need to do this again. So we do that, and then we're going to go into the actual repository that is that cloned Git repo. So we go in there, and then the next thing we're going to do is actually launch the Shiny app using npm install. So npm stands for Node Package Manager. So this is actually just calling that Node.js process I talked about to launch the Shiny app. So right now it's just going to launch the default Shiny app or app.art file that we have in the Git repo, which as you'll see is hello world. So there it is. There's your Shiny app, just like it would be in any other context. So right now, you could send this, package this directory up, zip it up, and send it to a user, but they'd have to open terminal and do npm install to launch the Shiny app. That's not always a great option for people. So you actually, to do the last step, to package it up into a full-on executable or application, you do this the last step, that is the npm run package win, or run package Mac for a Mac platform. And this is actually going to create an out directory, and I'll show you that here. So it's kind of hard to see. So before this, these were the directories in here, and this directory did not exist before this step. So this final step creates this out directory, and once we're in there, we can instruct the user to navigate here, and now they'll actually be an application that they can double click and launch the Shiny app. So this video is embedded in my presentation materials, so you can actually go in, you can not watch it at 2 times speed, and you can figure out how to do this. And the instructions are all on our Git, but the video is kind of a nice little visual cue to do so. And this is the final step. You can actually compress this, and then I can send this zip file to a user however I want to. It's usually a little too big to email, but if you've got a USB or if you've got a SFTP, like file sharing service with your client, you can do it then. So that is kind of the basic use case. Of course, we probably don't want to send our user the Hello World app, even though it's super cool. So I'm going to tell you guys how you might have to tweak this Electron environment as your Shiny app ramps up in intensity. So these are some actual use cases. So a real world example, a Shiny app I built for one of our clients, basically they did this manual process in Excel every week to generate this report. Took them like 2 to 3 hours. So I looked at the report they generated, I wrote R code to query their internal database and do all the cleansing automatically in R. Took that, put it into a Shiny app, just like you would in any other context, and now how do we get the Shiny app to the user? So that's where Electron comes in. So basically, I would just reclone that repo, swap out the app.r file, and there'll be videos on how to do this. But we noticed that in the Windows context, there were a few little tweaks we had to make to the Electron environment. So we noticed that on Windows, our Shiny app was making a Unix command call, so we had to install RTools for the Windows environment. And then just within the Electron repo itself, we had to redirect it to the relative path where we had placed our tools. And then in both the Windows and Mac environment, we're going to have to install new packages, just like we would in any other Shiny application instance where we have a new package we haven't used before that is not installed. We'll have to do that here just like that. So these videos kind of go over both of those things. So the first is kind of a new app.r file. So this is just showing you, first off, Windows in the or Electron in the Windows environment. So this whole first point is just to show you it basically looks the exact same. I'm just in command prompt, just Windows version of terminal. So if I go in there, you can see right here I'm actually launching R within Electron. So the video jumped really quickly. But so if we back up a little bit, so I'm actually in the Electron repo here, and I just run r.exe, and I am actually launching R in this Electron environment. So this is that R Portable. And I can go here and I can see, all right, what packages need to be installed. And I realize, oh, Lubridate's not installed. Let me install that. And I install it just like I would in any other context. The difference is I'm not running R on my local machine. It's in Electron. So that's what this step is. And then, let's see here. Also, you might want to create a new Shiny app. So I think this video got skipped over somehow in the beauty of live demos. So right here, you can see that's the app.r file at the top level. So if I wanted to, and then we've got the app file in the out directory that gets created. So if I wanted to switch out this app file at the top level, I could just go in, open that app.r file in a text editor, and copy and paste my new Shiny app code. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to get the Shiny app code for, I think this is like the Rock Explorer Shiny app. So just highlight it, just copy and paste. And then I could do an npm start and it'll launch my new Shiny app. So that's kind of what I'm going to show you here. And for the sake of time, we'll just kind of speed it up. So this is just my new Shiny app running. So I can show you guys this later, but I'm going to kind of move on for now. So, and then another way we've used this, this is just another example. So we actually built a model. The end user was not someone who would want to or be able to interface with an R package we built. So we actually packaged the model up and got it to the user. And this whole project took 8 weeks total. So it is not a model deployment strategy you maybe want to use long term. But in this use case, it got the model into the user's hands, and they've been running it monthly and seeing how it lines up with kind of, what they expect to see happening. And as they start to see value from it, then we can discuss how would we actually integrate this model into your kind of model factory, they call it, within this big company. And in this use case, the model was basically predicting the risk for big IT projects, ironically. So how likely are they to go over budget, under budget, take longer than expected? So that's what the model was doing, but we had to get it to the user. So that's kind of the bulk of it. I'll save some time for questions. There's some additional considerations. So one of the videos will show you how to really quickly swap out that app.r file to do a new Shiny app instead of Hello World. If you're doing this, you always want to do a fresh clone of that Electron repo, so that way you're not creating multiple out directories in that Electron packager stage. And so it's always best to kind of start fresh. The size of this application can be kind of large. So if you think about it, we have R inside of here. We've got your Shiny app. We've got some other things in there. So it can be about 300 to 500 megs. And there's a few things you can do to trim down that size a little bit. So I will take a pause there and see if you guys have any questions. But hopefully this is enough to get you guys started using Electron if you'd like. And if you notice any bugs, submit an issue on our Git. I'd love to hear from you. So you could, if you wanted to ship data with the app, you could just include it in any directory really within Electron. You just have to, within your Shiny app, reference that path, kind of like you would just in any other Shiny app. So that's what you do there. Typically, we actually avoid sending data in these applications. So typically, we'll have the user upload data. In the one example, the app is actually querying their external database. So that's how they're getting the data in. And in the instance where we sent the trained model object over, we actually stripped out the data. So there wouldn't be any data sent in any of these interactions or leaving their premises. So typically, our users don't want any data in there. But if you did, you could just load it up. Within the Shiny code. You just have to reference wherever you placed it within the Electron directory, just like you would in any other circumstance.